What if tomorrow morning people didn't wake up sick, they woke up different? No memories, no speech, just hunger. Zombie outbreaks dominate modern science fiction, from The Walking Dead and The Last of Us to 28 Days Later and World War Z. But beneath the gore and spectacle is a much deeper question. Could a virus actually do this? Not magic, not curses, not radiation. Real biology, real pathogens, real neuroscience. Because disturbingly, nature is already much closer to zombies than most people realise. Before we can talk about viruses, we need to define what a zombie actually is. Not in the movies, but in the biological sense. Across most science fictional universes, zombies share a common set of traits. There's a loss of higher cognitive function, an extreme aggression or predatory behaviour. There's a reduced pain perception, a compulsive feeding or biting trait, and quite often a transmission through bodily fluids aspect. If we strip away the supernatural framing, and none of this requires any magic, it's pretty much all neurology. Human behaviour is governed by interconnected brain regions. The prefrontal cortex controls reasoning, morality, and impulse inhibition. The amygdala regulates fear, threat detection, and aggression. The hypothalamus controls hunger, thirst, and basic survival drives. And the brainstem governs motor function and reflexes. Damage, inflammation, or chemical disruption of these systems can radically alter behaviour while leaving the person alive. In other words, a zombie doesn't need to be a dead human. It just needs to be a human with a damaged brain. The first zombies were inspired by real-life viruses. The closest real-world analogue to a zombie virus is probably rabies. Rabies is uniquely terrifying because of how it behaves. It enters through the body, through a bite. Travels along peripheral nerves, moves directly into the brain, and by the time symptoms have appeared, it is almost always fatal. Neurological symptoms of advanced rabies include confusion and delirium, hallucinations, loss of impulse control, extreme agitation, uncontrollable biting, and hypersalivation. The virus spreads through saliva, exactly the way zombie infections do in science fiction. Historically, rabies victims were described as possessed, monstrous, or beast-like. In medieval Europe, outbreaks of rabies were partially responsible for inspiring myths of werewolves and revenants. Rabies does not create zombies, but it does demonstrate that a virus can target the brain, alter behaviour, increase aggression, and encourage biting as a transmission strategy. That alone is uncomfortably similar to the zombie viruses of sci-fi. If you want genuine mind control, viruses are actually not the best example. Parasites are. The most famous is Ophiocordyceps, the so-called zombie ant fungus. This fungus infects an ant, spreads through its body, and releases chemicals that override the ant's nervous system. The ant is forced to climb vegetation to a precise height and orientation. Its jaws clamp shut, the ant dies. A fungal stalk erupts from its head and releases spores. The ant is alive until the final moment, but it has no agency of its own. Other examples are just as disturbing. Toxoplasma gondii removes fear in rodents, making them approach cats. Hairworms force insects to leap into water and drown. Parasitic flukes manipulate fish behaviour to increase predation. Evolution has repeatedly discovered that controlling behaviour is an extremely effective survival strategy. The critical question is not whether mind control exists, it's whether anything like this could scale and infect a human. Viruses already influence the human brain more than we like to admit. Some examples include influenza causing encephalitis and delirium, HIV causing some neurocognitive disorders. The herpes virus hides in neurons potentially for the rest of your life. There's examples of measles causing delayed neurological degeneration. And recently, COVID showed links to brain fog, mood changes, and psychosis. Viruses can cross the blood-brain barrier. They can infect neurons and glial cells. They can trigger massive neuroinflammation. They can disrupt neurotransmitter balance. However, the human brain presents a major obstacle to viruses. It is highly complex, highly redundant, and highly plastic. A single pathogen precisely controlling aggression, hunger, and motor function simultaneously is extraordinarily unlikely. Partial effects, however, are entirely plausible, and in fact, as I've already said, these are already observed. Zombies in science fiction consistently ignore the most important biological limitation of all: energy. The human brain consumes around 20% of the body's total energy supply. Muscles require oxygen, glucose, electrolytes, and intact cellular machinery. A virus that removes higher cognition, increases aggression, and drives constant movement would rapidly exhaust the body. Without hydration, nutrition, and rest, blood sugar would collapse, organs would fail, muscles would waste away, and the immune system would effectively implode. This is why slow, shambling zombies lasting for years are effectively biologically impossible. Any real zombie-like outbreak would be short-lived, extremely violent, and very lethal. So what about the old fast zombies versus slow zombies argument? From a biological perspective, fast zombies make a lot more sense than slow ones. A rage virus-style zombie, like those you see in 28 Days Later, are alive, metabolically active, driven by acute neurological disruption, highly contagious in the early phase, and will burn out quickly. The sort of slow, decaying undead zombies like you see in The Walking Dead violate a lot of the basic physics and biological principles. They require reanimated dead tissue and ignore muscle atrophy and energy loss. Dead cells do not move. Rotting brains cannot coordinate behaviour. Slow zombies exist for storytelling reasons, not scientific ones. Different science fiction franchises take radically different approaches to zombies. 28 Days Later, for example, this is probably the most scientifically plausible depiction of zombies. The victims are alive, infected, hyper-aggressive, and eventually die of starvation. Then there are the zombies of The Last of Us. This is actually based on a real fungal genus. Behavioural control in these zombies is exaggerated, but is grounded in parasitology. Human infection, unfortunately, remains extremely unlikely from a fungal source. The zombies of World War Z. They are depicted as hyper-fast, viral pandemic zombies. Their behaviour is unrealistic, but the transmission dynamics are very plausible from this film. What about the zombies of The Walking Dead? Pure fantasy, I'm afraid. Reanimation of the dead violates neurology, metabolism, and physics. What about Resident Evil zombies? They're a mix of virus, parasite, and fantasy biotechnology. Entertaining, but biologically incoherent. From a scientific standpoint, the rage virus scenarios are the only ones that really survive scientific scrutiny. Talking about Resident Evil, could humans ever engineer a zombie virus? Could science deliberately create something zombie-like? Let's have a look at the theory first. Viruses can be genetically modified. We've already done that. Neurotropic viruses exist. And behaviour can be influenced indirectly by viruses. That's the theory. The reality, human trials would be near impossible. The outcomes would be unpredictable. The mortality rate would be catastrophic, and any containment is likely to fail immediately. Such a pathogen, therefore, would be a weapon of pure chaos, not control. So what would the real zombie apocalypse actually look like? You don't need mind control monsters to collapse civilization. You need a mix of fear, misinformation, distrust, healthcare collapse, and supply chain failure. We saw a kind of mini preview of this during COVID. A severe neurological virus, even without zombies, could destabilise society far faster than any science fiction movie ever shows. So, what's the final verdict? Could a real zombie virus ever exist? A virus that raises the dead? No. A virus that fully controls human behaviour? No. A virus that causes aggression, confusion, and violent outbreaks? Yes. Nature already provides disturbing examples of this, and that reality is far more unsettling than science fiction. Which zombie depiction do you think is closest to reality? 28 Days Later? The Last of Us? World War Z? Let me know in the comments. I'm Dr. Dan Stokes, and please subscribe to the Real Science of Sci-Fi for more science behind the awesome stories of sci-fi.